and what is a Ruffle Stitch Portfolio and how do I use it? So here I have 2 pages out of my Ruffle Stitch Portfolio. If you have recently gotten a new Ruffler, I highly recommend this as one of your first projects. What this will do is it'll give me a really great visual guide of what the different settings on my Ruffler look like when combined with the different settings on my sewing machine. So on your Ruffler, you have a few different settings. When your Ruffler is set to 0, that means it's just going to do a straight stitch with no ruffles at all. When you set your ruffle to 1, that means for every stitch that you make, 1 new ruffle will be created. Here, I've done a setting on my Ruffler of 6, which means that there's going to be 1 ruffle for every 6 stitches that are made. And the same with 12. If you set your Ruffler to 12, that means there's going to be 1 new ruffle for every 12 stitches. Now, those seem like they should be self-explanatory, but the other factor that you need to keep in mind is also your stitch length settings on your sewing machine. So with different stitch lengths, you'll get a slightly different appearance on your ruffles. So for example, here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All 5 of these different ruffles use the same the same Ruffler setting of 6. So here, for every 6 stitches made, there is 1 ruffle on a setting of 6 on my Ruffler for each one of these ruffles, and yet they have a different appearance. So the reason for that is my stitch length settings on my sewing machine. The shorter your stitch length, the more tightly packed your ruffles are going to be. So here I've used a stitch length of 4, so this gives me a nice long kind of a ruffle. I've made my stitch length smaller in this example by using a stitch length of 3.5. My Ruffler setting is the same. These are both at a Ruffler setting of 6. The only difference is this is a longer stitch length and this is a shorter stitch length. A more dramatic example can be found here if we compare this ruffle. Oops, there we go. So this ruffle seems to be more tightly packed than this ruffle, and yet the Ruffler attachment settings are the same. They're both set to 1 ruffle for every 6 stitches, or a setting of 6. Here my stitch length is 2, here my stitch length is 4. So when you have a shorter stitch length, your ruffles are going to be more tightly packed together. When you have a longer stitch length, your ruffles are going to be spread out over a longer distance.